For centuries, there have been tales of strange things falling from the heavens. The Bible speaks of ancient storms raining down fire as part of God's incredible wrath and vengeance. But these strange rains aren't just ancient tales from distant climes. In Birmingham, back in 1954, there was a shower of frogs. Then, during the 70s in Berkshire, eggs fell from the sky. Odder still was the mystery of the raining vegetables in Southampton.
A shower of broad beans came through, I should think dozens and dozens of them.
Down come a shower of peas and maize, haricot beans.
But in Berkeley, Gloucestershire, on August the 5th, 2012, a strange rain fell once again. This time, there was a scattering of a seaweed-like substance all over the town. Was it God venting his anger, or is there an alternative explanation to this strange rain? I've come to meet with local residents, the Beltons, to find out more. Tell me about the 5th of August. What did you see?
When we were coming back from Weymouth, after watching the Olympics, the sailing, the sky was actually dark, really dark grey. You think, blimey, there's going to be a hell of a storm ahead. As we got into Berkeley, the rain had obviously just stopped. It had just been torrential, the rain, because we had flooding all around the patio here.
It had been a bad storm.
It had been a really bad storm.
Well, the next day, my daughter came to see us, and she parked her car, and when I went over to help her out with the grandchildren, just stood in this horrible stuff.
What did you see? Describe it to me.
It was like a light green, horrible slime, and just sort of said, well, what's that? And never seen it before. It's definitely peculiar, yeah, because there was just so much of it.
I would have had a poke and a sniff. Did you do that?
Well, we poked it.
Yeah?
It didn't move.
I don't poke and sniff things like that.
Yeah.
What do you think it was?
I just think it was some sort of algae, something that was in the ground, and with the rain coming down, it sort of like brought it all up.
What did you think it was?
Well, I thought it looked more like seaweed, really.
Let me get this right. Your theory is that it was seaweed that was carried somehow in a storm.
Yeah.
Your theory is it's this appearing funny
Because the
mass.
rain was just coming down so forcefully that it just brought something up.
Bubbled up. You hadn't seen this seaweed, algae, whatever it was before either?
No.
No, very strange.
Very strange indeed, isn't it? So where did it come from and what was it? It can't be that hard to differentiate between algae and seaweed. I mean, there are people who specialise in this kind of thing. Mark, this photograph was taken on the 5th of August, 2012. Very simple question. Is it algae or is it seaweed?
It's actually not a simple question at all. It's actually both. Seaweed is a complicated type of algae.
Could this algae/seaweed have just appeared out of the ground or from somewhere prompted by heavy rainfall?
I can't really see that happening, to be honest with you. There's quite a lot of material there, and that's unlikely to just suddenly appear.
In which case, it's travelled.
It must have done.
And you say that this is coastal looking.
Absolutely.
Where do you think it might have come from then?
Areas such as Clevedon or other areas in the Severn Estuary like to have organisms like that.
So it's likely that it came from a place like Clevedon.
Yeah.
But it's still, what, 30-odd miles away?
Yeah, about that.
Which is quite a long way for seaweed to travel on its own.
It certainly is.
So seaweed is a type of algae, and in this case, it definitely fell from the sky. In which case, how did the seaweed get to Berkeley? Because as far as I know, seaweed doesn't travel very well on its own. Therefore, I suspect that weather is involved, which is why I've come to the Met Office, the epicentre of weather, to find out if there is a suitable explanation. Hopefully, meteorologist Charles Powell can help shed some light on this mystery. What could possibly have happened?
Well, in the case of this, it's probably something to do with a tornado. You need something which has got quite a lot of energy, quite a lot of power to physically remove and then transport it away somewhere, then deposit it on the ground. In this case, was what, 20 or 30 miles away?
Can we look at that day, the 5th of August?
Yeah, we've got a bit of information. We take a look at this outline of the UK here. So you've got Bristol Channel up through here, and the area in question, Berkeley, I believe, is just up in this sort of part of the coastline here. You can see all sorts of things going on. And that kind of gives you an idea that there's an awful lot of energy. There's an awful lot sort of feeding it, and growing it, enlarging it, and that's the kind of thing you're looking for to kind of see some of this extreme weather.
So what we've got here is a combination of ingredients that could very well equal a tornado.
That's right.
Which could be an explanation for the seaweed getting sucked up into the twirl and spat out.
Seems a plausible type of bit, doesn't it?
So an unlikely sequence of events colluded, and seaweed like this was lifted off the beach here in Clevedon and transported 30 miles in that direction, where the good people of Berkeley were bamboozled by seaweed rain. Now, I think that this is a reasonable explanation, and we can happily say that it's no longer a mystery.
There are few things more mysterious than the mind and the body. We live at the most advanced point in medical history. The majority of illnesses have provable and explainable causes. And yet, through our research, almost half the people we polled believe that we can collapse for no medical reason. It just seems to be the odd occasion when the diagnosis makes no sense whatsoever. One such example is the phenomenon of mass hysteria. One of the most controversial occurrences of supposed mass hysteria in UK history was the Hollingwell incident. Just outside the small market town of Kirkby in Ashfield in Nottinghamshire, on the morning of the 13th of July 1980, hundreds of children gathered to take part in an annual marching band competition at the Hollingwell Showground. At 10:30 a.m, something strange started happening. The children started fainting, one after the other. The scene was described as a battlefield with bodies strewn everywhere. But was mass hysteria to blame, as was originally reported in the press? And what exactly is it? Sir Simon Wesley is a professor of psychological medicine at the Institute of Psychiatry, King's College London, and an expert on mass hysteria. Can you explain a little bit to me about mass hysteria, what it actually is?
Well, this is a very, very common phenomenon. That's the first thing to get over, that happens to completely normal people in somewhat abnormal circumstances. And let's take a classic example, okay? Imagine you've got a school assembly on a hot day, and then someone faints. Someone says, my God, someone's collapsed. That's something strange happening. There's a funny smell in here. I wonder what that is. And then people start to wonder, and very rapidly you get fear generated. People think, oh, maybe there's a gas leak, or maybe there's some crop spraying, or maybe there's something weird happening. And before you know it, other people are starting to collapse around you, and now you have an episode of mass hysteria. And now dozens, sometimes hundreds of people can collapse in very short and very quick order.
Is this always a negative thing?
Well, these are part of what we call just collective behaviours. And sometimes you have rather similar things. You know, the crowds outside the One Direction premiere from the outside can sometimes look rather similar. But at the end, they all went away happy. Whereas in an episode of mass hysteria, people actually think they're being made sick. And afterwards, looking back, they will say this was a terribly, frightening and awful episode.
But allegedly, it wasn't just children in the marching band that were affected. According to some reports, babies, adults, even horses began collapsing. Was it, as the press reported at the time, a case of mass hysteria? Or was it something a little more sinister? To help me answer this question, I've come back to the very field in Nottinghamshire to meet eyewitnesses Marjorie Speed, Julie Vaughan and Sandra Collier. So Marjorie, do you think it was mass hysteria?
No, not to have horses, children and adults and babies. You wouldn't have all those that are being, taking notes of everybody else.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure horses don't get hysterical like that.
No, that's what I mean. It was just, why did they say it was that?
Unexplainable, really.
Afterwards, we realised, well, what we think it was something to do with some form of chemical. I personally filled a sink full of water, put my two daughters' uniforms in the water, and my husband said straight away, oh, what on earth is that smell?
Really?
And there were fumes coming up.
So you girls think it was some sort of chemical that was in this field?
Yes, or had either been sprayed from above or was on the ground.
So maybe it wasn't mass hysteria after all. Could a chemical have caused this traumatic event with no lasting effects? To find out more about this new theory, I wanted to speak to author David Haslam, who has written extensively on the subject. The reason that was given was mass hysteria, and that's why all these children started collapsing. You've done a lot of research into this incident, you've written books on the subject. What do you think caused the Hollingwell incident?
A fruitful investigation would be an investigation into tridomorph.
So tell me about tridomorph. What's tridomorph?
Tridomorph's an agricultural chemical, and we do know that this was used nearby.
And how did it manifest itself on the day then? I mean, you said it had been used on some of the fields surrounding. Yeah. How would the marching bands have come into contact with it?
Its use as a fungicide. So the suggestion is that that day, the tridomorph was either disturbed by the marching feet or could have just been present in the atmosphere. It was a dry day, it was a still day, and it was not overly hot. So it could well be that this agent had got into the air.
So David, why do you think your theory wasn't dealt with at the time?
Those in positions of authority are under some pressure. They've got to give answers quickly. And unfortunately, mass hysteria can be something of what we'd call a straw man. Once I offer you the straw man of mass hysteria, it means you no longer have to go any further with your inquiry investigation.
So you draw a line under everything?
You draw a line under everything.
So was it tridomorph which caused those children to faint? And was mass hysteria used to explain away 300 people simultaneously collapsing, as David suggests? I've been looking into the mystery of the Hollingwell incident, where around 300 people fainted in a field in Nottinghamshire, and for which I've already discovered there are a number of theories. So it's clear, having spoken to our eyewitnesses and David, they absolutely believe that there was a toxin in the grass that caused the problem at Hollingwell. But the official verdict was mass hysteria. It's a fascinating subject, so I wanted to do some research, and we found a case that happened in Stevenage back in 2004 at a school where 50 school children and adults had been taken to hospital and were treated for headaches and sickness and nausea. But was this mass hysteria? Or is mass hysteria simply the diagnosis that is given for the unexplainable? I was keen to find out what Professor Sir Simon Wesley's views were on what happened that day in Hollingwell. What's your feeling on the Hollingwell incident?
Well, when you go back to the original accounts and you look at the original reports and the original A&E cards and you look at the original public health report and the original paper that was written at the time by the Director of Public Health, I think most of the evidence is really pretty compelling. This was another episode of mass hysteria.
What about the horses that were affected?
In all episodes, there's always odd anomalies that people remember many years later. What you have to remember, you have to look at the contemporary records and see what was said at the time, how it was managed and what happened.
People don't like to be labelled as being a part of something that sounds as outlandish as mass hysteria.
Sure, and it's easier to think of some mysterious gas or some mysterious chemical that the doctors missed and the scientists overlooked, and it was all a bit of a conspiracy. And so it is understandable that people come to these conclusions, but I think in many cases it isn't accurate.
Whatever happened that day at the Hollingwell show is always going to be shrouded in mystery. And as Ashfield District Council have got no intention of reopening the inquiry, we're not going to get any new answers. What is clear is that mass hysteria is a truly bizarre human affliction. And it's one that comes with a huge stigma attached. A stigma that means that, one, you're always going to want to find an alternative answer, and two, you're never going to want to admit that it could happen to you.
On the subject of strange and mysterious afflictions, let's talk about spontaneous human combustion. There are references peppered across our cultural landscape. According to our YouGov Mystery Map poll, 75% of you don't believe in it. Even though, as recently as 2011, it appeared as the cause of death in a coroner's report in Ireland. So I want to find out how it actually works and what are the chances of it happening to me. I've come to Senate House in London to meet someone who might be able to help. Jennifer, I want to allay people's fears at home.
Yeah.
What are the chances of me dying or them dying from spontaneous human combustion?
Your chances of spontaneously combusting, around 1 in 73 million.
Right.
Your chances of dying from being exposed to flames and things like that is about 1 in 80,000.
One of my big fears is sharks.
Yeah. Shark attacks, it's around 1 in 3 million, your chances of dying from a shark attack. So that's very rare. Struck by lightning, that's one of the things that, you know, people always talk about, the reference of it's never going to happen, it's like being struck by lightning. Yeah. Your chances are 1 in 160,000. So when you describe human combustion as, you know, oh, it's like being struck by lightning, it's never going to happen. I mean, you even compare 1 in 160,000 to 1 in 73 million. It really is such a small number.
There are a lot of cultural references to spontaneous human combustion. I mean, it pops up in Jane Eyre, This Is Spinal Tap, South Park, Family Guy, The Muppet Show even. And yet it is so incredibly rare.
I think it's that fear of the unknown that people get interested in. You know, the fact that it's so unpredictable, it seems to occur randomly, it's not very well understood. There's an air of mystery around it, and I think that's probably what makes it quite culturally popular. And so you think that it's probably a lot more common than it actually is.
Well, at least Jennifer has put my mind to rest. But I still want to know about the mechanics behind spontaneous human combustion. I'm meeting someone who's written extensively about the subject and apparently has an exciting new theory to share with me. Professor Brian J. Ford is a research biologist and an author who's lectured at universities including Cambridge and Leicester. He's also published work on the subject of spontaneous human combustion. It's a very nice, quaint little neighbourhood.
It is nice.
What's the mystery surrounding spontaneous human combustion?
Well, I can tell you, the mystery is not how does a person catch fire, but how does a person burst into flame? The point is that human bodies are profoundly non-inflammable. That's the mystery, and that's what I wanted to solve. This was first recorded back in the 1600s. People always tried to put morals on it. The people who died were always dissolute, or they were tramps. And the view that it was alcoholism that caused it was always prevalent. Alcohol is indeed inflammable, but tissues soaked in alcohol don't burn.
You're a professor. What's your answer?
Well, I can tell you what the answer is. The body also produces acetone. Now, if ever you pick up a little teething baby, you can quite often smell nail varnish remover, acetone on the breath. If you go and see somebody with any chronic disease, and you can smell acetone. So when people are ill, the amount of acetone in the body builds up. And I thought, well, acetone is highly inflammable, and then a slight spark can actually set fire to the acetone vapor and cause them to burst into flame. But better than just talking about it in theory, let me demonstrate it to you. And with any luck, I can show you exactly how spontaneous human combustion looks. It's quite dramatic.
I'm not one to say no to a hands-on experiment, so it's outside to Brian's garden, where he's prepared an exact scale model of his own front room and a miniature man made from pork and sausages, soaked in acetone. This is a first on British television. Are you set, Brian?
Yeah, as set as I'm ever going to be, dear.
And please don't try this at home.
So let's just see if there's enough vapor here to actually catch fire. And you see, this is just how the cases have been explained in the past. This is just what the accounts have been like, that the burning happens quite suddenly and it increases massively in intensity. You might think to yourself, well, the clothes have got acetone vapor in, so probably they would catch fire. OK, they might. And yet what is happening here is it's the core of the body.
He's down.
Anything that they're touching will immediately burst into flame.
It was at this point of Brian's experiment that I thought it prudent to make some scientific observations of my own. Should we be worried now that the cardboard backdrop is on fire, that the carpet's on fire, that the chair is on fire, that indeed the entire set is on fire?
Yes, I think we should.
There we go.
And round the back, if you don't mind.
I'm going round the back. Let's just get rid of this now. Well, it certainly caught fire.
So the remarkable thing is the amount of heat energy that comes out of flesh. As you can see, there's hardly anything left but ash. That's what we see in spontaneous human combustion.
Did he manage to prove anything other than that he had a very flammable garden?
He did, yes. Acetone is flammable, and we, human beings, can create acetone in our bodies. However, our little pork man was steeped in acetone. I mean, he'd had a proper soaking.
Oh dear.
Far more acetone than we would ever create in our own bodies. And that's where you have to allow your mind to expand with the experiments.
That aside, did he prove anything? Did he change anything?
I think one of the most interesting things is that historically spontaneous human combustion has been linked or associated with some sort of stigma. If someone was struck by spontaneous human combustion, then there was a suggestion that they might be degenerate in some sort of way. They might be perhaps an alcoholic, something like that. Yeah. And what Brian Ford is saying is, no, that alcohol has nothing to do with spontaneous human combustion.
So he's kind of dispelling the stigma.
Yeah.
Which is very similar to the situation that we find ourselves with mass hysteria. When I met Sir Simon Wesley, the point he was making was that people never want to be associated with it because of the stigma attached to it. They just don't believe that it can be mass hysteria because, as the girl said that I met, they're not that sort of people. They just don't believe it. And I don't think I would either if I was them as well. Did you ever wonder when you read about all those extraordinary animals around the world? You know, like in North America, they've got grizzly bears. In Australia, they have sharks. And the snakes in the Amazon, and the lions and the tigers in Africa. But over here, all we've got is, I don't know, some daddy longlegs and a few sparrows. But other than that, what have we got?
I'll tell you.
What?
The Beast of Bodmin Moor. 8% of us believe in the Beast of Bodmin Moor. And if you live in the West Country, that shoots up to 30%.
30%? Let's go west.
No place in the UK has arguably more myths, legends or rich folklore than the rural West Country. Residents here are much more likely to believe in unexplained beasts than anywhere else in the land. So while Ben goes off in hunt for the Beast of Bodmin Moor, my search for mythical creatures begins at the village church of Topsham in Devon. Tales of strange beasts and oversized feline creatures streaking across the landscape are nothing new. But what makes this story a more mysterious affair is that it happened back in 1855 and there still hasn't been a plausible explanation. The church at the heart of sleepy Topsham, where strange goings-on ensued on the night of the 8th of February 1855. Legend has it that abnormal cloven hoof prints with a tiny single stride appeared in the snow leading up to the church door. The mysterious tracks scaled up walls and over rooftops, across the rivers and dales, and continued for a staggering 100 miles. Some of the villagers believed the markings were left by Satan and went on the hunt for the devil himself. Since that day, the story of the devil's footprints remains firmly etched in folklore history. What caused the devil's footprints? Because I'm pretty certain it wasn't the devil. This church is fundamental to the story. The Reverend at the time, Henry Thomas Ellacombe, documented the event, and local historian John Downes has that evidence at hand.
Here is some of the archival material from the Illustrated London News, and you have here Ellacombe's original drawings.
They're like tiny little horse prints, aren't they? Hoofs, really.
Yeah.
But they're in a single file. So what animal, or human indeed, walks like that? In the mid-19th century, parts of Britain witnessed a revival of Catholic practice, and Reverend Ellacombe was a strong supporter of these changes, much to the disapproval of the Church of England parishioners. Unhappy with their forward-thinking priest, the villagers could have faked these footprints to slander him. It wouldn't have looked very good for the poor Reverend, having satanic hoof prints walking up to his front door. So this was a sort of a plot to frighten the Reverend, spook him out of the village?
Yeah, something like that. It was a cross between a practical joke and a piece of protest performance art by a sort of 19th century Banksy.
I like John's theory. It sounds reasonable, and I particularly liked his explanation of a rebellious expressionist, a sort of 19th century Banksy. But every good theory needs testing. So, I've had these made. They're a replica of the Reverend's drawings, and I'm going to make myself some strange, funny footprints. All I need is some snow. Right, OK. This is like walking in a pair of Vivienne Westwood heels. Oh, no! Right, I'm trying to go straight. Now, straight. Now, straight. Oh, now, straight. OK. That was my single file attempt. Not really very good. Time for plan B. Somebody's walking behind me, sweeping away the footprints. And this way, you can create the perfect, magical marking. What an extraordinary effort for human beings to go to. But if it wasn't a human being, what was it? I'm not the only one searching for a beast. Ben's on the moors searching for another. Only this one is much more famous.
Ever since I can remember, me and my family have come to Cornwall to visit my aunt, my uncle and my 2 cousins. My uncle was born and brought up here, and he used to be a fisherman in a village on the north coast. He used to scare the life out of us with stories of the beast of Bodmin Moor, who used to roam the moors, terrorising and attacking livestock at will. Now, no one ever saw the beast, although there was the odd grainy bit of footage. And clearly, the people of Cornwall are very proud of the legend. But it's always really bothered me. Does this beast actually exist? Every year, there are over 2,000 big cat sightings in the UK, but none more notorious than the beast of Bodmin Moor. Before I start my quest to find this elusive creature, I've come to Newquay Zoo to meet Animal Collections Manager John Meek, who hopefully can help me figure out what I should be looking for. This was a story that was in the paper just a couple of weeks ago. What did you make of this picture of this cat here?
One thing that strikes me more than anything is the pointed ears. If you look at pumas or leopards, they've got rounded ears. This thing's got a pointed ear, like a domestic cat.
OK. What about the tail? The tail looks quite big and pretty thick.
It does. Long and thin is often best for leopards and things, but actually this has got quite a bushy tail. I think it's domestic cat.
You still think that's domestic cat?
I think it is.
Where's the myth of the beast of Bodmin Moor come from?
Well, originally in 1976, the thinking is that big cats were released after the Dangerous Wild Animal licence was brought in.
OK.
But there were probably very few cats that were released like that.
So there were domestic animals that suddenly people had to have a licence to hold. They didn't want that, so they just threw them out.
Well, that's the theory. These animals could live in this country, but they would be seen far more regularly. And they would use farm tracks, so you'd find paw prints almost on a daily, if not weekly basis. You could also find faeces, and DNA would be very simple to get from those. And after 36 years, without a single body or a single piece of DNA, as far as I'm aware, it just seems incredibly unlikely.
Maybe John is right. Despite unconvincing evidence, we're desperate to believe that we have mythical beasts roaming our land. I'm off to meet 2 young men who've devoted the past 20 years of their lives trying to prove the beast's existence. Gents.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
How you doing? Kieran and Dan believe they first saw the beast of Bodmin Moor when they were just 12 years old.
One day we walked up this field looking down like, oh, there's some sort of footprints here. Look up and there's this black cat. Saw us, jumped in the hedge, didn't it? Yeah. It was the muscles on this thing. When it ran, we just knew it wasn't an ordinary one because of the size of the tail.
While Kieran was actually looking at the footprints that it left behind, out of the hedge, 10 feet in front of me, it just jumped out.
Since this sighting 20 years ago, the boys have been obsessed with gathering evidence.
OK, this is one of the biggest
What am I looking at here?
Right, well, this is the pad.
Oh, OK, yeah.
And it's got the 3 lobes. This is from last year.
That's from last year?
Yeah. The other thing is feces.
How do you know that's a big cat's feces? How?
Like a cat would be on a raw meat sort of diet.
You can see deer hair was in that.
Deer hair?
Yeah.
So it's taken out a deer? That's got to be quite a big cat of some sort to take down a deer.
Yeah.
Then the guys mentioned they had some nighttime footage. Hold on, so explain what I'm looking at.
It actually begins to walk along.
Where's he gone? So the problem is, as you say, it's still a little bit hazy, isn't it?
It's just slightly out of range.
Looking at the grainy footage, it was clear the boys needed some help. So if you could have any bit of equipment that you think would help, what would it be?
Oh, in a way, thermal imager, because you could pick up the heat source within the bush or a tree.
So thermal imaging camera of some sort?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might be able to help you there, boys.
While Ben's trying to track a big cat in Cornwall, I'm still hot on the heels of the devil's footprints in Devon. After my tomfoolery in the snow, I've had a call from a local who's got something interesting to show me, apparently. In 2009, Graham Inglis filmed some mysterious markings in the snow that he claims are identical to those in the legend of the devil's footprints.
I'm not a zoologist, but I know that animals don't hop around on one hoof.
Let's have a look. It is exactly as the Reverend drew it.
One line of tracks, no left, right pattern.
I conducted my own little experiment and I tried to create markings like this. There were human, you would have to leave human footprints beside your track and then cover them up. There was no evidence in that snow of anything like that.
It was a pristine surface and there were no human footprints anywhere in the vicinity.
This has really messed my head up now because I was pretty convinced that it was the work of a human. So what do you think it is?
Well, my feeling was that these were actually caused by 2 feet, so something hopping like a rabbit could do it, or possibly a hare.
So it's an impression rather than an actual horseshoe.
That's what I think, yes.
Thank you, Graham. You've confused me even more.
Well, hopefully it'll be solved one day.
It's midnight in Cornwall, and I've come to meet Dan and Kieran at their hide in the hope of catching a glimpse of the elusive beast. It's pitch black, so I've sourced them a thermal imaging camera in order to help with the search. If it works, you might be able to see me. Where's Kieran? Is he inside?
He's actually inside. He's got all the stuff ready.
Should we go and have a look?
Yes, go.
I'm absolutely blown away, but what are some of the gadgets and gizmos we've got in here?
We obviously have the camera, got a monitor to see what's coming through the camera.
You need an infrared light to be able to see through the camera. If we switch the switch, then we get...
Oh, wow. Oh.
Field.
And that's it. So suddenly we can see the field.
Yeah, and then we move this mechanism from inside so we can pick up the light.
Scan the light across.
Yeah.
Of course, we've now got a thermal imaging camera. So what should we do with that?
Well, the fantastic thing about the thermal camera, it'll be able to pick up any heat signature of the cat. It can be our eyes at night.
So 4 or 5 hours?
Yeah.
So how long you spend?
That's the maximum time we've done so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
So looks like it's going to be a long night. Dan and Kieran spent the weekend using the thermal imaging camera. However, apart from horses and other local wildlife, they still didn't manage to collect any conclusive proof. Furthermore, we sent the feces they collected for a DNA test. The results? A 100% match to a red fox.
I think a lot of the people in Cornwall, they love this legend. They thoroughly enjoy the fact there may be something out there. And a lot of the people in the real rural areas, they like to say, well, I've seen this cat, but I don't want to say too much about it. And I'm keeping it secret and things. So I think people like to think that nature's going to surprise us now and again.
Whilst I love the boys' tenacity, I began to wonder if the extraordinary things we like to imagine lurking in the dark are rendered ordinary once exposed under the spotlight. Okay, so what happened to you?
Well, I was also on the trail of a beast.
Right.
This is a beast that existed in the mid-19th century and left a very strange set of footprints in the snow. And then I got a phone call from a man who said, come and have a look at some footage that is only 4 years old. Now, my man, Graham, thought that the prints could very easily have been the prints of a rabbit. I got what I wanted, which was more recent evidence.
Yeah. Tangible proof.
Well, but then it turned out not to be so tangible.
And we've got nothing either. We're still waiting.
But perhaps that is what we like in this country. We love the mystery, the intrigue. We don't want to solve everything. Coming up.
He can read my thoughts. I can be in the next room and think about him, and he'll come round the corner.
No.
I think it's rather unlikely that dogs can pick up on what's going on in our brains as such.
We are a nation of dog lovers through and through. In 2012, dogs surpassed cats as the most popular pet in Great Britain, and it's no wonder. From being prized and pampered to being our loyal childhood companions, dogs have cemented their place in our lives. But do our furry friends have a more mysterious and unexplainable side? Do humans and dogs have an ability to understand each other better than any other human-animal relationship? Now this is a mystery which is close to my heart. When I was a little boy growing up in Essex, I had a very special companion, my Jack Russell, Daisy. I absolutely adored her. We went on holiday once, and Daisy, for some reason, ran off. She just disappeared. We looked for her for a couple of hours, but in the end it was getting dark and we had to turn away and go home. I was distraught. I was absolutely heartbroken. When I went to bed, I didn't think I'd ever see her again. However, when I woke up in the morning, somehow Daisy had found her way back to my aunt's house. But Daisy had never been to the beach we went to that day. She'd never done that journey before. She'd gone across hills, through bushes, across roads. Even though her paws were ripped to shreds, she had found her way back. How did she get from where she was, where she ran off, back to that house that night? As far as I was concerned, she had superpowers. It's the only way you can explain it. Maybe there is something more. Maybe these dogs do have sight beyond sight. Maybe they have got superpowers. And one dog who may well have such powers is Bryn. Bryn was a stray dog in Afghanistan, taken in by the British Army, who started to bring him on patrols. Incredibly, and with no training, Bryn was somehow able to learn to alert soldiers of changes to the landscape, therefore detecting roadside bombs, saving countless lives in the process. Since then, Bryn has retired to the UK, where current owner and carer Sally Baldwin has formed a unique bond with him. So I've come to the East Sussex countryside to meet them both to find out more. I had dogs when I was little, particularly one of them who had this incredible instinct for when I was upset or when I'd got into trouble again. And the dog you could sense it without me saying anything. Is that a bond that you have with Bryn?
He's like he can read my thoughts. I can be in the next room and think about him, and he'll come round the corner.
No.
I'm serious. It is really quite incredible. I honestly believe this dog has incredible senses.
Do you feel like you can communicate with him then?
In some ways, I do. Yes, I do. He will notice things that I haven't even begun to notice.
And that's something he notices visually?
Yeah.
A lot of the dogs that are trained up use their sense of smell particularly, but actually he's... As if to prove a point, Bryn then sensed the approach of another dog who was all but hidden to the naked eye.
Now, I wouldn't have noticed that dog was over there.
Bryn is a hero dog, but what I'm more interested in is his relationship with Sally. They seem to be able to communicate on a level that can't be explained. Furthermore, when we conducted our poll, 23% of you believe that at some point in the future, you will actually be able to have a conversation with your animals, which sounds ridiculous, but is it as far from the truth as it seems? Human-animal interaction is a subject University of Bristol professor John Bradshaw has spent his life studying. There certainly seems to be a way that we communicate with dogs particularly that isn't necessarily explainable.
Over the course of all the domestication they've gone through, they've learned how to pick up on human body language in a way that no other animal has, and is even, in many cases, more sensitive than we humans are.
It's communication in a more sort of emotional level.
It's a communication at a much more emotional level. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to be able to teach dogs how to talk. Their brains just aren't constructed that way. But we can build on this incredible bond that they have with us and their ability to sense how we're feeling as well as what we're doing.
Sally, who was Bryn's owner, Bryn was the dog that had protected the British forces in Afghanistan. She was saying that their bond is so intrinsic that she often just has to think about him and he comes into the room.
I think it's rather unlikely that dogs can pick up on what's going on in our brains as such, but it may be that while she's thinking of the dog, she's just behaving in a slightly different way. She's making tiny, tiny little noises that the dog's going, oh, you know, there's something slightly different about her, I'll go and see what she's up to. And so the dog comes in, and so the person believes that the dog has telepathic abilities, if you like.
So there's not necessarily telepathic dogs, but because their senses are so fine-tuned, they're picking up on things that we can't possibly be aware of.
I think it's us as humans being perhaps a little bit arrogant, assuming that the world that we see and we smell is the only one that exists. But there's another one that dogs live in, which has got all this extra detail, which they're able to sense, which we're not. Dogs exist really in the moment. They are looking for all the signs that we're giving them, that we are actually affectionate towards them, that we like them, that we want to keep them around. And they'll just keep picking up on that all the time and reacting to it in a second-to-second basis. So it may look as if they're listening to us. What they're actually doing more is attending to us.
It's clear from the places we've visited and from the people we've met, we're a land steeped in mysteries.
Either we are alone, or we're not.
Mysteries that seem as vibrant and alive today as at any point in our rich history.
I love this story because it's actually happening now.
We found them in palatial palaces, old churches and local towns.
We find ghosts incredibly fascinating.
We like the idea that there is an explanation for everything.
Some were far away, from the moors of Cornwall to the coastline of the Isle of Mull. People never want to be associated with it because of the stigma attached to it.
While others were closer to home than we could ever have imagined.
It is like he can read my thoughts.
With so many mysteries, what else is out there?